My guest today is Nick Miller, the U.S. Federal Team Lead at the AWS Marketplace for Amazon Web Services. Nick, thanks so much for joining us for the Zero Trust Exchange.
Thrilled to be here, Jason. Thank you.
We are going to continue our conversation about this idea of obviously zero trust. Duh, that's the name of it. But what we're talking about today is this implementation side. And I think as agencies get deeper into zero trust, there's a lot of things to consider because there's a lot of pieces and parts, including not just the devices and people, but now we're talking about IoT devices and connected devices. And it's growing. So let's just start at the beginning here a little bit and talk about what you're seeing around the zero trust implementation. When you talk to your customers, what are some of those things that they're kind of what they're asking for? What are you telling them? Just give us maybe the broad perspective.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason. So, at AWS, our mission is really to innovate on behalf of our customers, right? Like especially our government customers, they need to have less and less work when building and deploying and rapidly iterating to build and deliver secure systems. The mission of the government is really important, right? It provides for national security. It provides citizen services. It provides healthcare for veterans. And, from a security perspective, our customers are really looking to answer this ongoing question. What's the optimum set of patterns to ensure the right level of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the systems while increasing speed and agility? And so I think speed's really important, but increasingly our customers are asking us, about secure architectural patterns that fall under this banner of zero trust. And at AWS, we think of zero trust as a conceptual model and an associated set of mechanisms that focus on providing security controls around digital assets that do not solely fundamentally depend on this traditional network controls or network perimeters. And that's a really powerful concept, and we're excited to help our customers move through this implementation of zero trust.
You mentioned speed, you mentioned agility, but you also this idea that that's a fundamental change. So maybe let's start there a little bit. We've talked over the last couple of days during this event about how zero trust is different, how agencies have to move out of that network perimeter and more into the endpoint and user perimeter. That's the big fundamental difference that we've learned. From an AWS perspective, in Marketplace perspective, you all never really delivered to the network, right? You always at that endpoint. You always were at that user facing. So how are you kind of looking at zero trust from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Zero trust in our perspective as AWS really fundamentally refers to diminishing, the possibility of risk down to zero, possibly zero, right? That we don't trust the network, and traditionally, the trust has historically been created really around an actor's location within the network or the network perimeter, whether that's a person or a software component. And in this zero trust world, right, this network-centric models are augmented or really replaced by techniques that provide equal or better mechanisms than this perimeter-based approach. And so, as our customers are asking us about zero trust, we immediately see the possibility of confusion because there's all these different topics and concepts, much like you said, right? Around the edge or around the network. But there's also a clear indication and opportunity to build better, build faster, be more flexible, and deliver more secure systems. And I think that's really important. At AWS, we really think about organizing around a set of principles as we think about zero trust, and would be happy to just kind of tell you about those organizing principles that we have as AWS.
Well, let's talk about it a little bit. We know that there's the maturity model, right? But I think it's probably a little different than what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I think, the government's been pushing the maturity model, but really at AWS, global company, and, we've had to think about, some guiding principles to help our customers as they think about embracing zero trust and guide ourselves through that confusion. So, our first principle is really this conceptual model that decreases reliance on the network location. We've talked about that, right? And the best security doesn't come from making this binary choice between identity-centric and network-centric tools, but rather effectively using them in combination. And I think if you look at the old paradigm, it was really focused on kind of this network-centric or identity-centric. It was this binary choice, right? Our second principle is that zero trust can really mean different things in different contexts. And that's important because nuance matters in this conversation. And arguably one of the key reasons around this ambiguity is that the term encompasses many different use cases. As you said, it encompasses edge, right? It encompasses the centralized network. And, for us, those use cases share only the fundamental technical concept of diminishing the security relevance of the network location or boundary. And by focusing on a specific problem we're trying to solve and approaching that with fresh ideas and new tools, we can really avoid getting mired in these low value conversations and really talk about achieving some of the objectives of the presidential executive order on cybersecurity. And our third principle is that zero trust must be applied in accordance with the organizational value of the system and data being protected. And I think for me personally, that's really important concept that, your approach to zero trust needs to be applied perhaps differently depending upon the organizational value of the system and data that you're trying to protect. And that leads to some choice. And so over time, this conceptual model and these mechanisms will continue to improve defense in depth, continue to make security controls we already have better, and provide customers increased visibility into the nature of kind of their perimeter and how AWS can help apply these tenets of zero trust to raise the bar for security.
One of the key things you bring up is understanding the systems and data you're trying to protect, understanding this idea that not everything needs equal protection. And I think that's something that we've seen from the Office of Management Budget and this push towards zero trust is what are your high value assets? Start there and kind of work out. Is that the type of conversations you're having with a lot of federal customers that are asking, okay, we really want to start with this set of data and then figure out how much security we need around the crown jewels and back up? What are you hearing around? Do they get that yet, or they're still not quite there yet? They're still in that kind of beginning stages.
Yeah, so it's a great question. A lot of the conversations I have around are how do we adopt modern technologies to help implement zero trust, right? Our customers are struggling with kind of the timeline that's been pushed to implement a zero trust architecture by the end of fiscal year 2024, right? And so when I get brought in with the marketplace, often customers are asking me, how do I think about a marketplace-centric approach to drive continuous innovation? At AWS, our now Amazon CEO, he would talk about, speed is not preordained, right? And as we think about the timeline that the government's under to implement this, we have to implement strategies that allow them to move quick. And a lot of the conversations I have are around what are those strategies that we can use to help move fast while meeting the acquisition regulations and the competition rules and requirements that we have as a government to ensure things like fair and open competition.
The 2024 deadline, we think it's so far away, but it's coming quick. And I think a lot of times agencies, there's this whole big buildup about, we got to put the policies in place and governance. And then all of a sudden, okay, now we have to actually do the work. Let's get that question answered. What are some of those big strategies to move fast, but still within the rules?
Yeah, this is a really complex topic, right? And it's important in my mind. There's a number of high-level documents that talk about accelerating agencies' move to the cloud and their move and migration of applications and systems to the cloud. And when I look at the cloud, AWS Marketplace has been in the market for 10 years, right? And just last year at reInvent, we announced that billions of dollars of products are being sold, and that figure continues to grow quickly. And I say that in as much as to say, one of the government's mandates is to buy more like commercial industry. Well, I think that statement actually talks about commercial industry moving to this model. And so when I talk to customers, my goal is to help them figure out with their rules and their regulations and their governance framework, how can they move and purchase in a model that allows them to leverage the full benefit of the cloud? I mean, if you look at what that represents, that scale, cutting that out, you're really not leveraging the full benefit of the cloud, right? And so we have to be able to do both. And that's kind of what I talk to my customers about, is we have to be able to implement this digital acquisition and this methodology to provide governance while balancing or provide speed while balancing the governance and compliance and controls the government's under and mandated.
I think that's always the tricky thing, is the speed while balancing governance and controls and other rules. And I think that's probably the issue that I think a lot of agencies are running up against, is because they do want to move. They see their opportunity to get better, yet there are sometimes important steps or obstacles, and maybe that's not even the best word to use, that kind of say, okay, we'll slow down, make sure it meets certain rules. When we talk about this space, I mean, it's always rapidly evolving. There's always a need to refresh. You bring up cloud, and I think that's one of the big benefits of cloud that people are excited about, that someone like AWS Marketplace or whomever that's providing cloud services across the federal sector are always kind of updating their technologies, their capabilities, the services they provide. Do you feel like that there's the same piece to zero trust, that there's this continuous refresh that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, we have to think about strategies that provide continuous innovation and continuous refresh and continuous tech transition. Recently, the CEO of CrowdStrike, one of an AWS partner, he talked about how AWS Marketplace is shortening the sales cycle by 50%, right? And he did that in front of Wall Street analysts. And I often say, what would it mean if we could shorten the sales cycle for small, innovative ISVs that are delivering technology and innovation on top of the AWS platform by 50%, right? I mean, this is how you can think about the 2024 timeline and perhaps think, well, it's really not that far away if we can decrease those cycles by 50%, right? But we have to do that in a way that ensures fair and open competition and allows for compliance. And I think technologies like cloud marketplaces and AWS Marketplace can help you achieve those objectives.
I'm going to have to ask you to go back for a second. ISVs is probably a term that everyone knows in the AWS world, but in the non-AWS world, why don't you define when you say ISVs?
Yeah, so ISV is an independent software vendor. This is an independent software vendor like Splunk, an AWS partner, like CrowdStrike, like Zscaler, companies that have invested a significant amount of money to meet the requirements of the government and achieve certifications like IL4 and IL5. And they're built on AWS and offering SaaS platforms to the government.
And the reason why you're talking about them is because AWS Marketplace or AWS itself does not necessarily provide the quote unquote zero trust. Through those partners like Zscaler, like Splunk, that's where the combination of the AWS services, the cloud services, and those tools kind of come together to provide that architecture.
Yes, I mean, we have a number of services that help, right? I mean, virtual private clouds, can be thought of as the network perimeter, and there's still some value. We talked about that, right? It's not a binary choice or either or, but in order to really leverage the full benefit of the cloud, you need AWS partners, right? AWS partners extend your reach and accelerate your migration, and that's been proven. And AWS Marketplace is a way to streamline procurement to access those third-party partners while getting the benefit of consolidated billing, ease of procurement, from over 2,000 software vendors and over 12,000 products, right? So it's a really large digital curated catalog that helps our customers in cloud find, buy, deploy, and govern third-party software as part of their overall AWS relationship. And increasingly, I'm talking to government customers about how do they use that to drive innovation in the federal space.
When you talk about the partners and the ISVs, a new term for me, I can start using that one in my repertoire of acronyms that you build up when you cover the government like I do. What do you hear from them about what the government's asking? What are some of the trends that you're hearing through your partners? Yeah,
again, I spend most of my time talking to independent software vendors, and maybe just to frame that term for you. You probably heard the term original equipment manufacturer. In the cloud, right, they're software vendors, right? They're delivering an as-a-service capability. And so what I hear from them is, how does AWS help accelerate their journey to support the federal government, right? And we have a number of programs at AWS that can do that. The first really starts on the commercial side, right? How do we help these ISVs, these partners of AWS, build well-architected and SaaS offerings that meet security principles and frameworks that AWS deems are best practices. And those are things like SaaS Factory. And then we have a number of programs at AWS that once that product's built, how do we help them take that to market and scale that, right? Because continuous innovation requires that you are able to grow and scale and continue to reinvest, right? And so we have a number of programs like the Global Startup Program and our ISV Accelerate program, where these are programs that AWS has launched with our partners to help them grow and scale their business in cloud. And increasingly, that business is being transacted through AWS Marketplace.
You mentioned build the programs, but also take it to market and scale. I think the scale piece is the most important thing. I think so many, when I talk to CIOs and the federal agencies, and they talk about, well, can it meet 30,000 users, 75,000 users, 150,000 users? Is that probably the biggest challenge around when you talk about SaaS services and software and the need to meet zero trust? Because this is not just, well, a small section of the agency will use it. This is everyone in the agency will use it. Is scale one of the big challenges you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, right? I mean, AWS is the largest global cloud with over 200 services, and our ISV partners are starting their journey in the commercial market, and they're building on top of that. And so they get to leverage that scale as they try to deliver those services to the federal government. And so, I think there's a need for humility here, but I think the AWS cloud has proven that we can help deliver that scale to customers globally and increasingly the federal government.
I don't think anyone ever doubted that AWS can deliver scale. That's well established. And I was just thinking more from the user's perspective. If they're buying a tool that's in the marketplace that's dependent on AWS, can that tool scale? Because just because you have that underlying infrastructure that can handle 1 billion people doesn't mean your tool can handle 1 billion people. So I didn't know if that's a question that comes up. It sounds like maybe it doesn't, because it probably, whether it's a Splunk or a Zscaler or whomever, they probably already have some of that big scale already.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing I talked to you about, Jason, is one of the values of Marketplace is we've brought that utility consumption model, that pay-as-you-go flavor to the Marketplace into software, right? And so as you move to cloud, if you decide that this product hasn't been able to achieve the scale, you're able to quickly then perhaps swap it in or swap it out. And this is really important because, as you mentioned, right, like zero trust is an operating framework, conceptual model that the government has to implement, but it's going to evolve over the next 2 years, and it's going to rapidly evolve. And we have to be able to, think about what are those tools we're using, and how do we make sure we're working with vendors that offer scale and that are continuing to innovate on our behalf. And if they're not innovating on your behalf, how do you think about moving in the next vendor that will be?
That's another interesting point you bring up is this modular approach to zero trust. And there's a lot of discussion around interoperability and open standards because, well, one tool works today, but the threats change and now you need a different tool, or you need a tool that has new capabilities that maybe weren't available a year ago or 2 years ago. Is that another point of discussion that you're hearing a lot from your federal customers or your ISVs about this need to be interoperable, open standards, plug and play? You can use whatever term you want.
Yes, and then I'll tell you how I hear about it, because it's really important, right? As a customer starts their migration to the cloud, right, they often need a contract vehicle, right? It's just the way the government works. And if we're going to this modular architecture that we just said, and we're trying to implement a zero trust framework, how many contract vehicles do you need then to operate in cloud, right? And if we have to scale the contracting enterprise to be able to deliver a true cloud experience, that's going to be a really daunting task, because it's already daunting to keep up with the innovation of this new zero trust model, right? And so when I talk to a lot of customers, I get a lot of questions from customers on how can Marketplace help them streamline procurement. AWS Marketplace just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. Really great. We launched just as a way to offer operating systems in the cloud. And over the last 10 years, we've delivered a decade of innovation and led industry in launching features that help streamline procurement, add governance, and really think about integrating third-party software at the same speed that they can leverage the cloud, right? But during that journey, our customers have told us how frustrated they are with traditional procurement methods. And that's something that we've heard globally, right? Not just with the federal government, but I do think when I talk to federal government customers, there's a sentiment that we need to rethink this strategy for procurement if we're going to achieve these zero trust objectives.
I think there's so many pieces there, right? You mentioned earlier the consumption-based model. That's such a big challenge for agencies when it comes to cloud. You talk about the need for speed, scalability, and all the things that fall into the obstacles around a lot of what agencies do with buying zero trust tools. I want to just maybe shift for a second and talk about when you talk about the adoption itself and where are agencies today? What are some of the things that they're asking you for? We talked a little bit about the speed, the scalability, and some of those things, but let's go to the next level down. I mean, identity management, we hear a lot about. That's the first step. Are they moving beyond identity management? Are they moving beyond other areas? Look, what are some of the technologies that you're seeing them into? And again, it's all in parallel, so we know that.
Yeah. From a technologies perspective, AWS Marketplace really thinks about how do we ensure that we have broad selection across the categories our customers care about, right? So we offer 65 categories, and that includes security, which is often, many of the technologies that you face, but also in the database space, right, where you have vendors like Databricks or MongoDB, and in the line of business space, an area that AWS Marketplace continues to explore. And so we see adoption across different federal government agencies across all 65 of those categories. But as it relates to zero trust, largely it is, what are those baseline technologies, whether it's in the logging, whether it's in the identity and access management, whether it's in securing the endpoint, right? And we see broad adoption across all of that. Each agency that I talk to seems to have a different priority and a different focus. And I think that's okay, right? We want to be able to help meet them where they are and provide them a strategy to achieve these objectives.
As I was doing a little bit of research for our conversation, Nick, one of the things that I found was a really interesting blog post that you all wrote around kind of how AWS Marketplace looks at zero trust. And one of the things among many that stood out to me was this idea of agencies are going to be in this hybrid world. They're going to have some in cloud, some services in the cloud. They're going to have some data, some systems that's going to be in a data center. So they're going to kind of have to cross. And one of the things that you all do is really just focus on APIs and really trying to ensure that you are able to kind of communicate and have these, if you will, policies, security policies that can go whether you're in a SaaS solution or on your data center. If you're able to talk a little bit about that kind of concept, because I think a lot of agencies, that's where they're going to be for the next 3, 5, 7 years is in this hybrid world. So if they can apply these zero trust principles across both their environments, can you maybe talk a little bit about how that works and why that's important?
The government's embarking on probably the largest migration journey over the next couple of years as they try to migrate and accelerate that migration to the cloud. And that means migrating the applications and moving the applications and migrating the data to the cloud, right? But to your point, they're going to be operating in this hybrid world for some period of time. AWS Marketplace has released features such as Marketplace Container Anywhere that allows you to buy containers, a new technology that has some play and some vendors who are working in the zero trust space, and check those containers out and run them in an on-premise managed Kubernetes cluster or EKS Anywhere cluster or a Kubernetes managed service offering from partners like Red Hat or D2IQ, because we recognize that customers are going to be in this hybrid world as they accelerate their migration to cloud, and we feel that will help. And this is where across a lot of parts of the zero trust stack and many of the vendors you're going to talk to, they also have a hybrid story, and this is where Marketplace can help you access them as part of your cloud migration journey and operate in that world. But I think if we step way back and we look at the executive order, right, the goal is to accelerate that migration to cloud.
And I think that acceleration comes from being confident in the security you have and understanding that your data is protected, that users are protected. And Nick, I see we're just about out of time. From your perspective and beyond, obviously, come check out AWS Marketplace and see how cool you guys are. What's the big kind of message you want to make sure you leave with our audience today about the move to zero trust and where this is all heading?
Yeah. Look, I think AWS is here to help. At AWS, we say security is job zero, right? And that's part of our culture here is that, you can't overlook this. And zero trust is the next paradigm, is the next operating framework for how security will be implemented in the cloud. And so security is job zero. And so, I might just offer, if this is an area that you would like to learn more about, and you want to know how we can support implementing zero trust security models, check out our Reinforce. It's coming up in July 26th and 27th, and it's really a 2-day focus on cloud security. We do believe security is job zero at AWS, and we're committed to helping the government achieve its modernization missions as part of this executive order.
Very good. Nick, I very much enjoyed our conversation. Unfortunately, we are out of time for this session. So let me thank my guest. Nick Miller is the U.S. Federal Team Lead at the AWS Marketplace for Amazon Web Services. Nick, thanks so much for taking the time.
Jason, thanks so much for having us, and thanks for what you do for our federal government customers.
All right. I'm Jason Miller. Now let me send you back to the studio for more from the Zero Trust Cyber Exchange.